If you want to play totally rad secret agents from the 1980s with all the feel and the fun that came with that era, well, I've got a setting for you in Savage Worlds called Street Wolves by Paul Vincent Rudolph. Hey everyone, it's Carl with Tabletop Tango. Look at the bubbles, do the stuff. We'd love your support. We'd love emails. We'd love feedback, all that kind of good stuff. And if you've got comments or interesting ideas or thoughts on the setting, put them in the comments below. And if you do want to support us, you can do it through DriveThruRPG. Look at the website and you can buy the Helix Nebula Situation, which is a adventure I published. And then lastly, we have a new podcast, not so new now, we're in a second season, called Mastering the RPG on general RPG topics. You might like that as well. So anyway, let's talk about Street Wolves. It's by Paul Vincent Rudolph. It's a game where it's an alternate 1980s where there's kind of secret societies and you're in a secret agent order, not necessarily, government, but you're going after these folks. It's got this real interesting 80s vibe. It's got the gear. It's got the idea of kind of neon view. There's actually a thing called the vapor, which makes cities kind of have that hue. And so it's really kind of, it definitely got that kitsch of feeling of like the 1980s with the gear and the equipment and how things set. And for me, being a child of the 80s, it's kind of fun to look at. So let's talk about it. Let's go through it kind of as an overview. Again, it's not a review. It's really an overview of the setting and some of the things it has to offer. So let's get into it. So first thing is the art style is very reminiscent, feels very 80s vibe. It's got those, colors that you're used to seeing, kind of that neon feel. Pretty cool as far as that goes. So it's I enjoyed looking at the book for sure. So the first thing is character creation. It adds a new skill called Tradecraft, which is all your clandestine knowledge that you know, which makes sense to have that as a separate skill. There's about 14 hindrances that I think I counted right. So if I counted wrong, sorry. I just was going through the book, trying to count them. So there's 14 new hindrances. There's a couple of interesting ones I'll point out. One is vapor poisoning, which means you're affected by the vapor. I'll talk about vapor in a little bit, but it's the thing that gives the arcane background to the setting. Then there's also the 80s was the rise of personal computers and arcades and all that kind of fun stuff. And so there's actually a hindrance where you are obsessed with the high score of video games. And so if you see one where you don't have the high score, you're going to go and try to play it. So what an interesting role-playing opportunity that is. There's also one that shows that you're still part of the shadow organization. It's called shadow conditioning, where you might have mixed loyalties. So that's an interesting one as too. Then when we talk about edges, there's 32 new edges. Again, that's what I thought I counted. Some are kind of fun. Like one here is the one-liner ace, which is you do a clever quip after incapacitating a foe. And, it sort of gives you that chance to do that one-liner like the 80s movies everybody did. And you could lead to getting a Benny based on what you do there. There's Elite Hacker. There's also one called Pop Culture Nerd, which gives you a +2 common knowledge when it comes to media from the era and gives them interesting role-playing opportunities. Again, I'm a child of the 80s, so I totally would be all over, the movies from back then, and some of those ideas. It would be kind of fun. And so there's a lot of other edges too. Interesting, I thought there was a few of them in there. During character creation, you give yourself a code name, which obviously you should make it really feel like the 80s. So you define that during character creation. And then you also choose a profession. Now, profession kind of gives you added skill bonuses, it gives you edge options, and it gives you the basic gear. So an example of that would be a detective. And for a detective, you get 5 extra points to spend in things like academics, common knowledge, healing, intimidation, knowledge, persuasion, or I should say notice, persuasion and research. And then there's some bonus edges that you can get, which is things like alertness, bad to the bone, connections, investigation, et cetera, et cetera. So these professions give you sort of a package, and it's you might consider it a framework or something like that, like you might have seen in other settings. And then it has some archetypes that it defines, so you can just kind of pick them out, customize them yourself, and get ready to play right away. Gear selection. Normally, when I do an overview, I don't talk a lot about gear because it's gear, right? But the gear section, I actually enjoyed reading it because, boy, was it nostalgia in the sense of there's a lot of 80s stuff in there, like, the 80s cell phone, the big ones and the bag ones, and there was pagers. So can you imagine in your adventure somebody trying to page one of your secret agents with important information and they're trying to find a phone so they can make a call back? That would be pretty cool. It adds some weapons, adds some armor, kind of, and then of course it has the standard Savage Worlds mix. They're very, very much all over the 80s. And then there's also a vehicle selection. Some of the equipment is, things like personal computers and items like that, which, given the limitations, so it's on that cusp of super modern technology with home computers and stuff like that. There's also VR. They add in VR a little more advanced than VR would be and really was in the 80s when you were talking about the Virtual Boy being the state of the art there. But they add that in so they can use it as part of kind of their hacking system because you can hack computers and things like that. So the next section, it talks about vapor. Now, vapor is this mysterious substance that permeates the air around major cities. And it came from, and I'm not sure I'm giving away a secret, but, the players are going to be secret agents and are going to know this anyway, but it's debated how it happened, but I think if I remember reading the book right, there was kind of an explosion at one of these shadow organizations, and so now it permeates everything. It's what gives the setting its arcane background. So the arcane background is tied to vapor. Based on the pictures I saw in the book, vapor gives this kind of a neon glow to the city. So just think about that. Go back to what's that neon bright color of the 80s. Just imagine a city being covered with that. That's kind of cool. And then in the setting material, they discuss the Wolfpack origins, where they came from, kind of the history of the world, that alternate history, because it diverges a little bit with these shadow organizations that the Street Wolves are going against. They were an organization sanctioned by the government for a while, and now they're sort of building themselves out from the pieces because there was a big battle. It's got an interesting story as far as the origin story of your secret agency that you work for. So I'm going to try to not talk about too much of the secrets, but you know that you're fighting against the key terrorist organizations called the Shadows of New Tomorrow. And they were growing and during the traditional Cold War era that so they were happening and working against, I guess they were more just kind of watch the world burn kind of organization during the Cold War. One of the nice parts is the characters in the wolf pack get, and that's what they call it, you're a wolf pack because you're street wolves. You get basic gear, you get the ability to get fake documentation, you're able to get caches of equipment, or caches of equipment, sorry, and you can in different parts of the country. So there's some things you just don't have to do or worry about, right? You're set up to do your job. But there is an internal investigation unit if you complete missions in a negative way, like not minimizing casualties, hurting members of the public, using excessive force when you don't need to. You could go in front of this internal investigations group and be stripped of your kind of rank for a while. And so it's a game that says, yeah, we're secret agents, but we're not carte blanche to go kill anything and just go murder hobo. Could be ramifications based on that. So then it talks about the network of groups that are the enemies. There's obviously the network of shadows. There's the divine light. There's one. There's communism still. And in that section, when it talks about these enemies, it gives the kinds of members you'd see. It gives the structure, the types of activities they might get into. So that gives you that idea of the kind of adventures you might go on. It gives member examples, what they're like. So are they true believers, fanatics, just wanting to watch the world burn, if you're talking about the network of shadows, or I should say Shadows of New Tomorrow. So there's a lot of secret organizations, as well as, there's still communism. There's still the 1980s reality that this book is based in. So that's the setting material. So let's talk a little bit about the setting rules that they bring into play. So I'll just talk about a couple of them, not all of them, but there's a concept of drive where the players start with drive points. So that's another kind of attribute that they might have. And then they devolve into corruption and just being the bad guy based on these drive points. And so a player loses drive for failing to do a spirit check, a drive check, when they do things like killing a person, torturing, harming civilians, not stopping an ally from doing the same thing. So you can't have the paladin concept where the paladin turns around and, oh, you want to go torture somebody? All right, I'll go look over here. That's fine. I don't, I didn't see anything. And that's where this investigation bureau comes in, is if you do those sort of things. What drives that mechanic is if you do run afoul to the losing drive, you might get hindrances and things like that. They also have a kind of a leave mechanic for downtime, which gives you ideas, lots of ideas on the kinds of things that could be happen during downtime. It has a hacking section. It sticks with that retro future vibe. So there's things like VR space and 3D online presence that wasn't really a thing in the 80s, but you can go into VR and do hacking. And so not all that dissimilar, lots of settings that, bring in that as a component of the game. And you can have whole adventures within VR space if you so desire. So there's a hacking section. Book covers how hacking happens. It wasn't too complicated. It can take advantage of dramatic tasks and things like that to do it. So hacking section was okay. Now, hacking is such a personal thing, it seems to me. I've played lots of settings, and there's lots of settings for Cyberpunk that have hacking. And some hacking I like, some hacking's too complex. So you'd have to read up on the hacking here, see if it works for you or whether there's something else that might work better for you. When I do hacking, I keep it real simple. I use the hacking roll, and you get into the system, you do what you need to do, you get out of the system. If you fail to roll, things can happen. But the VR part they have in the book might be interesting, and you might enjoy that. And then there's the concept, one of the other setting roles is the montage, right? Because 80s movies always had the montage of somebody getting ready to do battle, right? I guess some of those classic teen movies where they had to save the teen center against the big bad. And so there's a montage of getting ready for the thing. And so really true to the source material, they give some guidelines on how to use montages that tell part of the story. And of course, you can get a Benny for doing that. Guidance on running them. And there's lots of scenes with tables of random elements related to montage. So that I think that helps the game master a little bit there. Another thing that I found in the book, after all of that, there is their allies and adversaries. So that has kind of the key people from these shadow organizations that you might run into. And it also has a section with a bunch of named allies that Game Master can pull into their their campaign, and kind of use them, as is with their stat blocks. They have the secret societies, like I mentioned, with their members and troops. They have standard people you might run into every day. And all in all, it's got plenty to draw from. I do like that it has some NPC allies that you can just pull in and use. That's nice. Then there's a GM section, as oft these books have. And this includes tables to generate adventures to help you do that. The author really plays into this 80s feeling, which again, I find cool. And they recommend to leverage soundtracks. So they actually give a recommendation like use soundtracks, set the mood, set the theme, think of those classic songs that would just get you going. So I think that's pretty cool. I forgot to mention, but even in character creation, there's this concept of getting a signature outfit that you set up. So, you're looking cool, when you're out there, and then there's also potentially an outfit for when you're on a mission, but you pick that signature style. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then the book finishes up with a sample adventure. It doesn't have a plot point in the book, but it does have a sample adventure, so you get a feel for how the system works or how the setting is put together. So all in all, I thought, you know, again, nostalgia for me. I thought, wow, that was kind of fun. I loved the kind of the vibe. I love the idea of being a secret agent in the time frame where technology was just kind of starting. You could hack, you could get, you know, connect into the computers of a big corp and do some stuff. But in the 80s feeling. So pretty cool. I think it was nice that they included a arcane background using the vapor. You could obviously remove that if you don't want arcane backgrounds. But overall, there's a lot of material in this book. Again, settings sometimes are personal, but I could see, you know, playing this one just because of that retro futuristic feel. So anyway, that is Street Wolves. And hopefully, if this sounds great, you'll pick it up and support the author. So again, I'm Carl with Tabletop Tango. Look at the bubbles, do the stuff, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.